most of the tech companies are exploiting the vulnerability of the Indian middle class. And that's what a B.Tech engineer is being recruited for 2.5 lakh rupees by companies like Cognizant, which have a profit of about $7.5-8 billion. The private engineering colleges have grown their fees by about 300 to 400%. But the salary of Infosys, TCS, Wipro, Accenture, Cognizant and all remained where they were, or has grown marginally by about 5-10%. But what is the cost of education? About 20 lakh rupees. What is the fee that salary that you get? 3 lakh rupees. How many years would it take for them to cover the money? About 6-8 years. These big tech companies have exploited the vulnerability of this particular middle class, and how they exploited that to ensure that their profits grew up while the salaries almost remained stagnant. Dear parents and students, Namaskar. Welcome to Career 360. Today, we're going to discuss the reality of placements, especially by the big tech companies in engineering colleges. As you know, 15 years back, much of placement in engineering colleges was normally the core engineering companies, the L&Ts, the ACC, the cement companies, the steel companies, all these companies used to go and recruit from engineering colleges. But in the last 15-20 years, that changed completely. We actually had the big tech companies going and recruiting in bulk. And these companies recruit about 30, 40, 50,000, even 100,000 students each year from the engineering campuses. That ensured that the number of students who were taking B.Tech also grew dramatically. Last year, about 20 to 25 lakh students actually got admission into a B.Tech college or a college which is offering B.Tech. But the reality of the placements that are being done by these companies, the kind of offers that are being made by these companies is a very, very stark reminder of how it is still an employer's market where employees are meant to be sweating it out. Let me give you some information and data of how these big five tech companies, or not just these big five, but most of the tech companies are exploiting the vulnerability of the Indian middle class. A lot of you would want to aspire to be working at Infosys, at TCS, at Wipro, at Cognizant, Accenture, which is correct because the kind of aura that you have of these companies, the kind of profits that they have, the fact that they're in the news every single day for different reasons, makes it very worthwhile. And then they have a fantastic campus, a fantastic work-life balance possibly again I'm saying, because there are a lot of reports of toxic work culture also in these companies. But today we're going to confine ourselves to the kind of salaries that are being made by these companies and where they have kept pace with time. Infosys, for example, in 2010 had about 1.28 lakh employees, about 1,28,000 employees. This year, they have about 3,23,000. So the employed, increased by about 153%. TCS, which was about 1.6 lakh employees in March 2010, is now about 6 lakh employees, a growth of 278%. Wipro had 1,08,000 employees, which is now 2.34 lakh, and so on and so forth. Cognizant is 223% growth, Accenture is 291% growth. So across these big tech companies, if you notice, the growth has been, they've almost trebled in the kind of size of employees that they actually at this point in time have. Almost trebled. And all this obviously is recruitment from many of these engineering and management colleges. But have they really kept pace with the kind of salaries, the kind of inflation that you have, the kind of cost increase that you have for education? And which is the big story that we are working on now. What you have on the screen is a letter of 2007 given by TCS. The designation or the role of this person is Assistant Systems Engineer Training. The salary, if you see very closely, is about 3,15,787. The salary is 3,15,787 in 2007. Now look at what we'll do is we'll track this particular designation, this particular role, which is Assistant System Engineers Training, and how the salary of this particular designation moved over the years since 2007. This is another letter of 2012 where for the same role, Assistant Systems Engineer Training, the salary remained at 3,16,387. Not much growth. Not much growth at all after 5 years. Then we moved to 2022, just 2 years back. Again the same thing, Assistant Systems Engineer Training of TCS, and we show you the offer letter here. The salary moved from 3,16,000 to 3,36,877. A very, very marginal growth over 5-6 years. Now we look at the current offer at this point in time, the salary actually reduced. They brought in some incentive structure, they made the entire pay a bit more variable, but the salary, which was 3.36 lakh, has now come down to 2.95 lakh rupees. Now if you look at it, from 2007 to 2024, what was 3,16,000 is now 2,95,000. The salary has actually fallen in 17 years. So after 17 years, the salary of exactly the same role of a person who's working in TCS has fallen from what was 3.16 lakh rupees is to 2,95,000. No other industry would have actually allowed this to happen. But in software industry, in tech industry, this happens. What you see on the screen right now, the compensation structure for an assistant system engineer trainee from the website of TCS. The total salary it shows in 2025 to be 3.36 lakh, including variable component that they've added at this point in time. But all put together, if you now notice, 2007 to 2025, the salary has just grown by 20,000 rupees, or just about 3-4% or 5%. And that you're exploiting the vulnerability of a student who still wants to work at TCS. But this is not an isolated case. It's not just TCS that does it. I think across the system in the tech industry, this seems to be a pattern and a practice. Let us examine Infosys now. What we show on your screen now, offer letter of Infosys of 2010. The role is again engineer trainee, systems engineer trainee. The salary, if you notice very closely, is about 27,084 rupees. This was in 2010. Now move further down to 2018. What was 27,000 still remains 27,000. The designation still is the system engineer trainee. Now what you see on the screen now is the letter of 2022, just 2 years back, for the same designation, which is systems engineer trainee. The salary from 27,000 has moved to 30,000. So in 2010, what was 27,000, in 2022, after 12 years, has grown by 3,000 or not even 10%. In 2024, that still remained 30,000 rupees. So in 14 years apart, the salary of a person who is a systems engineer trainee, who is recruited from the engineering college in this country, has moved from 27,000 rupees to about 30,000 rupees and nothing more. Now, what we have to look at is the kind of inflation that happened during the same period. During the same period, if you were to take the income tax inflation index, because all of us pay income tax, so there's an inflation index that income tax authorities come up with to factor the inflation when you're paying tax, right? In this 15 years, from 2010 to 2025, the inflation index moved from 100 to 197, which means what was 197 rupees today is worth 100 rupees then in 2010. And they factor in the 5-6-7% inflation that we have. And if you have to go by that, the TCS salary actually dropped 60% in real terms. The real term salary, because we are now factoring in inflation, between 2007 to 2025, when we actually have the latest offer, the TCS salary dropped 60% because what was 3,15,000 in 2007 should have been 7,89,000 this year if you were to factor in the inflation index of about 2007 to 2025, 18 years, right? And in Infosys salary dropped 49%. Because what was 3.25 lakh in 2010, if you factored in the inflation for 15 years, it should have been 6,40,000, but the actual salary is 3,15,000 only. So you actually are dealing with the salary of these big tech companies being half of what it was supposed to be over the last 15 years. Forget about increment, forget about growth. You could not even keep pace with the inflation. And that's a very, very sad commentary on how our big tech companies are using the manpower that India produces, the demographic dividend that India produces, and how they're being possibly exploited just because they're in desperate need for a job. And this is not an isolated case. Again, I keep saying this. We looked at the top 5 companies, TCS, Infosys, Wipro, Accenture and Cognizant, and tried to look at the kind of salary growth that they had since 2010. What was about 3.3 lakh rupees in 2010, across the board, 3.3 and 3 lakhs and all for Accenture and Cognizant, has remained almost the same, which is 3.6 lakh. What was 3.3 lakhs has moved to 3.6 lakhs, and so on and so forth. The growth has been, in terms of, real terms, has been negative, as I told you, but it's been not more than 10% growth over 15 years. And that's a very, very sad commentary, right? It is not that these companies are struggling or to survive or something like that, because of which these people are not willing to pay their employees what they deserve. They're making a lot of money out of it. The profit of Infosys, which was 5,755 crores in 2010, is this year, 2025, is 26,750 crores, almost 5 times. The TCS profit, which was 7,000 crores, is now 48,000 crores, which is 7 times growth. The Wipro profit, which is 4,000 crores, is now 13,500 crores, which is about 3.5 times growth. Cognizant 734 million to 2.5 billion, which is again 3.5 times. And Accenture, which is about 1.7 billion, is now 7.68 billion, again about 4-5 times. So all these people, the profit has grown by about 400 to 500%. The salary remained constant. And that is a sad commentary on how these companies are dealing with our manpower. And it is not just that the salaries are stagnant. They also are very, very arbitrary, and possibly they think that they have very good systems, but they are also, terminating employees, sacking employees, or keeping them on the bench or benching employees a lot more than what it used to be. Every single news item that is coming up of late is about the layoffs. Infosys did that. Accenture has done that. TCS has done that. It deferred a wage hike. Wipro is about to lay off a lot of people. And the worst thing is, recently, in a off-campus recruitment drive, Cognizant offered 2.5 lakh. Forget about 3.3 lakhs and all that we're talking about. Cognizant actually offered 2.5 lakh in an open market drive to recruit people. And this is the worst of the lot that we are dealing with, because that is not a salary that even the lowest of the lowest people, the minimum wages also would not be sufficient for that. And that's what a B.Tech engineer is being recruited for, 2.5 lakh rupees by companies like Cognizant, which have a profit of about $7.5-8 billion. And as I keep saying, they are, one, stagnating the salaries, two, they're laying off people or terminating people or not recruiting enough. And the thing is, their headcount also has started taking a hit. In 2024, just in 2024, Infosys, the total headcount dropped by about 26,000. TCS, the headcount dropped by about 13,000. Wipro, the headcount dropped by 14,759, which means the number of employees who were employed by Wipro fell down by about 14,759 in the year 2024. Cognizant by about 11,000, and Accenture actually grew. But all the companies, if you notice, in 2024 have taken a massive hit in terms of the number of employees. So they started recruiting lesser than what they were doing. They let people go either by termination or because of the normal turnover of employees that you have. But the total headcount by these companies have started falling dramatically in 2024. And I shudder to think how it will happen in the age of AI, where a lot of foreign companies are no longer needing as much work from these companies, and how it will pan out. And by the way, as I told you, the salaries have stagnated in all these companies, but how is the cost of education? Obviously they're recruiting B.Tech students from all over the country. So what are the kind of fees that the students were paying in 2010 to 2025? And that's what we wanted to compare to see how the pace has been. Just take IITs, simply IITs. IITs, the total fee in 2010 was about 2 lakh for the entire 4-year tenure. Now it is about 8 lakh rupees and more. When we took the top 10 private universities in the country and tried to understand what are the average fees that they were charging in 2010 versus 2025, it drove about 325%. 325%. So across the board, at IITs, the growth has been 400% rise in fees in 15 years. The private engineering colleges have grown their fees by about 300 to 400%. But the salary of Infosys, TCS, Wipro, Accenture, Cognizant and all remained where they were, or has grown marginally by about 5-10%. Even comparing to the inflation index, it is almost halved, right? So what essentially are we dealing with? We are actually dealing with a ticking time bomb, where the big tech companies are exploiting the vulnerability of people to join those companies, because the dream of many of these people would be to join an Infosys, to join a TCS. The kind of festival that families have when an offer is coming from TCS, Wipro, Infosys and all, I can only well imagine. But most of these people at this point in time are being cheated for the simple reason that this offer was much better 15 years back. It's now almost half. The inflation doubled in the country. From what is 100 in 2010 is now about 197%. The salaries didn't keep up with the inflation, and they actually fell. In companies like Infosys fell by 49%. In companies like TCS, it fell by 60% in real terms. Right, and that is very important. Then you actually have a massive employee growth. Each of these companies have recruited 2 to 3 times more than what they were in 2010. The kind of increase in manpower that these companies saw is about 278% overall. The education cost skyrocketed. What was even in IITs, you actually have a 400% growth in fees, and the private education is about 350 to 400%. And most importantly, while all this was happening, the company's profits have grown by between 400 to 800%. All these companies earning a lot more money, recruiting a lot more, but at a lesser price, so that their profits can keep shooting out. And whenever possible, they also go for layoffs. Quite simply, when you look at this entire story, when you look at the entire saga, what we're dealing with is it's a recruiter's market where employees will go where possible. And if it's one of these big companies, they'll still go there because they need the job. But what is the cost of education? About 20 lakh rupees. What is the fee that, salary that you get? 3 lakh rupees. What is the ROI? How many years would it take for them to recover the money? About 6-8 years. At one point in time, a 3.5 lakh salary that these companies offer, and the fee being about less than 2 lakh. Within 6 months, you're going to repay back. Now even in 6-7 years you cannot repay back. That's the payback period that you're dealing with. But I know a lot of parents in India would still want to have the children join these companies because they need a job. And the skill set that they have needs a job. And that job is given in bulk by these companies which recruit in 30, 40, 50,000 as I said. But are you still dreaming of joining these sweatshops, or do you think there is an opportunity for you to join some other company where you can actually learn more, skill yourself more and grow faster? Because mind you, in these companies, the work that you do also would almost be similar. You're in the factory setup. You're one of the factory men. So what is it that the B.Tech students must do is an open question. But the simple thing is, what was earlier a 6-month payback, 6-month salary would pay back your fees, is now almost 6 to 7 years payback. And that is a sad commentary on the education in India, the cost of education in India, the inflation in the cost of education in India, and how these big tech companies, they've exploited the vulnerability of this particular middle class, the booming class as we call it, and how they exploited that to ensure that their profit grew up while the salaries almost remained stagnant. I hope I'm able to make you think about this whole thing. I hope that all of us will at some point in time start looking at it more critically and questioning these big tech companies of how they're dealing with our young people, our young generation. And I hope these companies also listen to these voices and start looking at employees with a lot more empathy and a lot more understanding than trying to make it a market forces thing. Thank you so much. Namaskar.